I must inform members that the clerk of the committee can only receive motions for the election of the chair. The clerk cannot receive other types of motions, cannot entertain points of order, nor participate in debate. Nous pouvons donc procéder à l'élection à la présidence.
Therefore, with the election of the chairman, according to 106.1, the chair has to be part of the governing party. Mr. Simard, I move that John Aldar should be chair of the committee. I put forward his name. No. Georges Chal, my colleague, is the name I put forward. It is moved by Mr. Simard that Mr. Shahar be elected chair of the committee. Are there further motions?
It has been moved by Mr. Simard that Mr. Chahal be elected as chair of the committee. Is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Yes.
I declare the motion carried and Mr. Chahal duly elected chair of the committee. I invite Mr. Chahal to take the chair.
Thank you, colleagues. It's an honor to be the chair of the Natural Resources Committee. I look forward to working with all of you over the months ahead on these important studies we've undertaken. I want to take a moment to thank our former chair, Chair John Aldag, for the tremendous job he's done this session. Thank you so much. Clerk Patrick, look forward to working with you. Dana and Laura, both of you have done a tremendous job as well. Thank you. Today, we meet to resume our study of Canada's clean energy plans in the context of North American energy transformation. We will then proceed to sit in camera to discuss committee business. In accordance with our routine motion, I am informing the committee that all remote participants have completed the required connection tests in advance of this meeting. I will now welcome the witnesses who are with us this afternoon. First, Chemistry Industry Association of Canada. We are joined by Mr. Greg Moffat, Vice President Policy and Corporate Security, and David Cherniak, Policy Manager, Business and Transportation. From Clean Energy Canada, Rochelle Doran, Vice President, Policy and Strategy. We had from Hoverlink Ontario, Christopher Morgan, who is unable to join us today, and we will reschedule Mr. Morgan to another date. We have from Resource Works Society, Margareta Duval, Managing Director, and from the Transition Accelerator, James Meadowcroft, Transition Pathway Principal. Thank you, the witness, for joining us. I have these lovely cards. Yellow will be 30 seconds left in your 5-minute introduction. Red is that you're out of time. Please complete your thought, and we'll proceed to the next witness. So we'll start today with the Chemistry Industry Association of Canada, Mr. Greg Moffat.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm privileged to be in the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. This region is still the home of many Indigenous people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to be here today. Chemistry and plastics are Canada's third largest manufacturing sector, generating over $90 billion in annual shipments. 80% of the sector's annual production is export-oriented, with most exports destined to the United States. More importantly, the sector is poised for significant growth. Today, over 24 chemistry projects have been proposed, which, taken together, represent at least $30 billion in investments, each of which is envisioned as low or net zero emissions. This includes Dow's proposal to build the world's first fully net carbon zero petrochemical facility in Fort Saskatchewan. There is a 5-part pathway to transition the global chemistry industry to low carbon. This includes carbon capture and storage and utilization, hydrogen, electrification, feedstock switching to lower carbon resources, including biomass, and building circularity for our downstream products, essentially avoiding production through post-consumer product recovery and reformulation. The wonderful news is that Canada is only one of 2 regions worldwide capable of providing all 5 of these pathways to support the sector's transformation. Importantly, these pathways will also help downstream manufacturing sectors reduce their own emissions as chemistry products work their way through supply chains. However, I must make clear 2 very real challenges. First, these new projects are proposed. There are no shovels in the ground, no modules on order. We have not seen any final investment decisions. There is significant work to turn these proposals into built infrastructure. Second, we need to attract every dollar of investment we can to lower emissions in the existing chemistry industry. A rough estimate suggests we have 200 to 300 billion of existing chemistry infrastructure in Canada. To transform fully to low or net zero production by 2050, we will need to recapitalize all of that infrastructure. The global chemistry industry will make the transition to a lower emissions economy. The only question is, where will these investments take place? I believe this committee shares an interest with us in seeing that Canada not only participates in the next wave of chemistry investments, but that it fully participates in the first wave of net zero chemistry investments. The Government of Canada must undertake 2 important actions to help realize the projects mentioned earlier, attract new investments. First, place attention on the broader investment climate. Study after study shows that Canada is slipping in attracting foreign investment, and our future prosperity is potentially at stake. While attracting 200 to 300 billion in new investments over the next 2 decades sounds doable, the reality is that over the past 2 decades, the sector has only attracted about 10 billion in new investments. In short, the status quo approach will not suffice. The true value of incentives like the Alberta Petrochemicals Incentive Program and those in the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act is the transparency and certainty provided to investors. If you meet a predetermined set of criteria, you receive the credits. There is no adjudication behind closed doors. There is no picking favorites. The intent of these credits is winning investment, plain and simple. In Canada, we continue to insert barriers into our investment policy, and we must be mindful of the risks associated with that. Second, we need to ensure the tax credits we have been discussing for 3 years become law as soon as possible. The Government of Canada has proposed and is consulting on the carbon capture, utilization and storage tax credit, a clean hydrogen tax credit, and clean electricity tax credit, among others. We have been talking for years about investment supports and ITCs, and not one shovel is yet in the ground. We need to see these credits passed into law so we can put private capital and Canadians to work. In closing, as an example of what is at stake if we get this wrong, we are at the risk of falling behind the United States in assisting our Asian colleagues in meeting their climate change commitments. As of today, over a dozen clean ammonia energy export projects are underway in the United States. While Canada has several such projects proposed, none are yet under construction. My colleague David Cherniak and I look forward to discussing some of the specifics of these ITCs with you. Thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moffat, for your introduction. We'll now move to Clean Energy Canada. Rochelle Doran.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. Clean Energy Canada is a think tank who have been focused on the clean energy transition for the past 10 years, based out of Simon Fraser University's Morris J. Wask Center for Dialogue. I would thank my colleague for the land acknowledgement and would echo it. But I'd like to start my remarks by really positioning us in how fast this transition is moving. In the year since this committee moved to make this a study, south of the border, the Inflation Reduction Act has led to 272 new projects, 170,000 new jobs, and $213 billion in new investments. That's in its first year. This week, the International Energy Agency revised their forecast to see peak fossil fuel demand before 2030. A recent study now projects that 2/3 of global car sales could be electric by the same date. The energy transition is not coming, it is here. And with 90% of global GDP now covered by net zero commitments, we are in the middle of the biggest economic transformation since the Industrial Revolution. But here is Canada's opportunity. Because according to modeling that we completed last spring, with the right policies, Canada has the ability to create 5 times more jobs in clean energy by 2050 than there are today, outpacing any decline in fossil fuel. There are huge opportunities for Canada's natural resource economy, like using our clean water supply and renewable energy potential to produce clean hydrogen, or using Quebec's iron ore, which is among the highest grade in the world, to make the next generation of clean steel. And these changes don't have to come at the expense of Canadian households. Our reports and those of colleagues show that Canadians can actually save money on their energy bills in the energy transition. But what does Canada need to do to seize this opportunity? So this spring, TD Economics estimated that Canada had actually spent more as a percentage of GDP vis-a-vis the US. So Canada has been doing some leaning in, but there's definitely more to do. And first, I would say, what Canada needs to do is focus on the opportunities of tomorrow, not yesterday. Green hydrogen, i.e. made with renewable energy, may be more expensive to produce today, but it's forecasted to be less expensive by the early 2030s. I would echo the comments of my colleague in the Chemistry Association, and we've written reports highlighting the real opportunity for Canada to become an exporter of the clean chemicals that will go into the battery supply chain and other products that will be needed in a net zero future. Second, we need to double down on our competitive advantages. Today, Canada's grid is 84% clean and the US is 40%. And as manufacturers clean their supply chains, this is going to be a huge advantage. But other countries won't let us keep that forever. The US has its eye on a clean grid by 2035. So at the federal level, the fiscal incentives like the Clean Electricity Tax Credit and regulatory reforms like the Clean Electricity Regulations will help support provinces to address the costs of build-out and ensure investor stability. My third point is move quickly, which I think has already been covered. So, time is of the essence. Fourth, be smart and strategic. Canada cannot match the US's market size and fiscal firepower dollar for dollar. So what we need to do is think strategically and smartly about this. I anticipate my colleague will speak more to this, but my first suggestion would be to use good industrial policy, namely being strategic, nimble, and iterative with industry, labor, Indigenous partners, and others, by setting clear objectives that can help orient private investment, and by choosing lanes. Give clarity on what Canada will and will not compete for. Canada, by doing these things, can help be prepared for emerging opportunities. Also, by strategically choosing investments, Canada can provide the best return on taxpayer dollars. In our work to help Canada meet the $50 billion opportunity of the EV battery supply chain, we estimated the jobs multiplier with battery gigafactories, like we've seen announced in St. Thomas and Windsor, and reportedly coming to Quebec, to be between 6 and 8 by 2030. So that's a high-value investment in terms of jobs and GDP, which is why jurisdictions are competing to secure them. But going forward, Canada can get even more advantage by focusing on the upstream. How do you get Canadian minerals into Canadian batteries to leverage our competitive advantage and ensure opportunities will be available in even more parts of the country? Finally, the American approach of using government buying power to create a market for low-carbon goods has been proven to support U.S. businesses and workers. Because Canadian products are already cleaner than the global average, buying clean can mean using the dollars the government was already planning to spend to support Canadian industry to meet those growing markets for clean materials. So Canada needs to finalize its own Buy Clean strategy. In conclusion, this is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to build a resilient, growing, and inclusive economy, and I look forward to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. We will now move to Margarita Dovgal from Resource Works Society.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Pleasure to be here, and I would also like to echo the earlier land acknowledgement. It's a pleasure to be here. As mentioned, I'm Margarita Dovgal, the Managing Director of Resource Works Society. We're a BC-based nonprofit, and we advocate for the continued recognition of Canada's economically productive, responsible natural resource industries, including mining, forestry, and oil and gas. We also organize the annual Indigenous Partnership Success Showcase, which is an event that brings together industry leaders and Indigenous partners to discuss discuss pathways to economic reconciliation. And we'll be returning in June in Vancouver for our 5th year, so hope we'll see people there. To delve into some of the pressing issues before us today that hinder Canada's ability to meaningfully respond to opportunities arising from the North American energy transformation, I wanted to touch on a couple of things. But before I do that, just want to say that the choices that we make here on energy and industrial policy, including right here in Ottawa, have enduring effects impacting not only workers in natural resource and clean technology industries, but also the quality of life for all Canadians. And our overall standard of living does continue to rely on the production and export of in-demand commodities to global markets. What the world seeks to buy is definitely shifting gradually, but we're actually well positioned for that shift. We have the right mix of raw materials, a skilled and trained workforce, a mature regulatory environment, and a wealth of innovation expertise and excellence within industries like natural resources. We can't lose sight of the value of what Canada can do for the world and our allies through our natural resources. One major challenge that we observe at ResourceWorks is the growing perception that federal recognition and support for natural resource development as a key driver of this economic well-being has declined in recent years. Continued investment in natural resource development has been and continues to be a cornerstone of our economy, but we're having issues, as Greg mentioned, with retaining and attracting investment to enable that job creation to take place. And right now we're in a world that's filled with economic and geopolitical uncertainties, and we urgently need investor certainty that can only be achieved through strong positive signals from all levels of government. Another matter is the creation of productive jobs in Canada. Resource-based manufacturing is something we think and talk about quite a bit at ResourceWorks. It's our strength here in Canada and has immense promise for the future. But without a secure and reliable supply of raw materials, grounded in timely mining approvals and permitting, our manufacturing capacity will continue to suffer and potentially decline. Consider, for example, lithium iron phosphate batteries. Recent decisions by auto manufacturers to direct investment to Canada relied on a combination of factors, including proximity to U.S. markets and our ability to source these critical minerals, like phosphates. So without a secure and reliable supply, that anticipated growth of EV manufacturing cannot be realized. Permitting issues represent a significant bottleneck here, with timelines for many types of new mine development estimated at 10 to 15 years, far longer than the global standard and what we should be striving for. Urgent action is needed to streamline and simplify these processes to provide clarity for investors, both from Canada and abroad. Another issue is the polarized and politicized decision-making process. Cooperation between federal and provincial governments is not just a good idea, but it's also essential if we want to move forward. And a lack of alignment not only hampers progress, but results also in policy measures that actually work across purposes with each other. Valuable time and political capital are being spent negotiating these conflicts rather than responding in a unified, coordinated manner to the changes afoot globally and with our greatest trading partner, the United States. So if projects make business sense and they advance our shared objectives with our allies like the U.S., the government's role should be to ensure that regulations are conducive to attracting that investment and that the joint responsibilities and accountabilities between federal and provincial governments are clearly defined and can be actioned. In order to land all of these potential benefits of a coordinated North American energy transformation, it's imperative that we strengthen our ties with the United States. But Canada also needs to be proactive in diversifying its trade and export products to seize global opportunities in the clean energy market. We see examples like liquefied natural gas, LNG, off the coast of British Columbia and other jurisdictions in the country. We've taken many years to get close to completion on our first major export project, LNG Canada, and that represents the largest private sector investment in Canadian history. In the same period of time, other competitor jurisdictions like Australia and Qatar have made sizable leaps forward. So that's a sobering reminder of the need we have to improve the speed at which we bring these projects online. By providing clarity, certainty, and support for attracting capital through competitive regulations and support for technology development, Canada can successfully transition to a clean energy economy and capitalize on the opportunities presented by the North American energy transformation. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to questions and further discussion on these topics.
Thank you, Ms. Dovgal, for your intro. We'll now move to Mr. James Meadowcroft from the Transition Accelerator.
Hi. First of all, thank you for allowing me to talk to you today. And as my colleagues have said, I welcome the land acknowledgement made by the first speaker. I'm speaking here for the Transition Accelerator, which is a national not-for-profit. I describe it not as a think tank, but a do tank. We work practically with stakeholders in government and industry across the country, accelerating transition pathways towards net zero, particularly in the electricity system, the decarbonization of buildings, the decarbonization of the transport system, the development of the hydrogen economy, and related areas. I'm also a professor in the School of Public Policy at Carleton University, specializing in long-term energy transitions and decarbonization. I echo, coming last, or towards the end, I echo many of the comments made by the previous speakers. It's clear that we are in the midst of a global energy transition, which has been gathering pace over the past couple of decades and will extend 2, 3, 4, and more decades into the future. It's a transition away from end-use fossil fuels, particularly in transport, buildings, and also in providing heat in industry. 20 years ago, you could be forgiven for thinking about the climate change issue as essentially an environmental issue about, preserving the climate, preserving an environment that is conducive to human society and other species and so on. But it's still an environmental issue, but today, from the point of view of a country like Canada, it's also an issue of industrial competitiveness and prosperity for the future generations of Canada. All our major competitors are heavily investing in the transformation of their energy systems, but also their transport systems, their electricity systems, their industrial structure, in order to move towards net zero emissions around the turn of the century. Think about Germany, the UK, France, and of course the United States, and reference has already been made to the enormous investment that the US is now undertaking under the IRA. We're building a new energy economy, and prosperity and jobs over the next 20, 30 years beyond depend on whether Canada keeps pace and develops the new resources and economic investments that will allow us to prosper in a net zero world. One kind of caution I'd make is that we think about transitions as taking place very slowly. Actually, if you look at all the big changes in technologies, from the adoption of mobile telephones to the moving from horse-drawn transport to the automobile, not much seems to change for multiple decades. And then you hit the upward steep slope on the S-curve, and things change far more rapidly than people thought. So right now, decarbonization of electricity systems, the uptake of electric vehicles is hitting that accelerated step, both in the advanced countries but also globally. So for instance, IRENA, which is the International Renewable Energy Association, had a report out yesterday that actually said the deployment of renewable energies over the past 3 years and the uptake of electric vehicles and batteries is now so fast that it's actually meeting their projected model of achieving a 1.5 degree limit on global warming. That's to say decarbonization by mid-century, which they were actually surprised that this was actually happening. So things look slow for a time and then speed up. Some of you may have seen on Spark Street today, there was a show organized by Accelerate, which is everything to do with electrification and hydrogen vehicles in Canada, and many promising models of where we're going to be moving over the next few years are there. So I would just say some companies and investments will survive and adapt in a net zero world. Others that look very powerful, important today, will be gone in 15 or 20 years. And we need to ensure that the investments of the future are growing and we don't cling to the economy of the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meadowcroft. We'll now start our rounds of questioning for 6 minutes each. We'll start with Mr. Jeremy Patzer from the Conservative Party. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And once again, just offer congratulations on your appointment to chair. Look forward to seeing how your time as the chair goes from here. So thank you once again, though, for taking the position. I'm going to start with Clean Energy Canada. We hear a lot about getting the last 14% of our grid clean, per se. You said we're at 84%. The Americans are only at 40, so that means that we're already doing extremely well on this front. But yeah, it's going to take a doubling of grid capacity that we've heard from a few witnesses, at the very least, to be able to do this last 15, 16%. And we keep hearing everybody say, well, this is what we got to do to get off of fossil fuels, oil and gas, however you want to say it. But no one has ever actually said how we're actually going to accomplish it. Maybe you could just enlighten the committee on how we're actually going to provide that doubling of grid capacity in the next 12 years to meet that deadline of 2035.
Sure. Thank you so much for the question. I think you've hit on two important things the grid needs to do in the near future, and that's decarbonize and grow. And there is challenge there, and that's why I think it's so essential that this committee and the government is thinking about all the tools in the toolbox to try to make sure that's happening. I think in my remarks I referenced, just what a competitive advantage this is, and certainly, I think in modeling around trying to achieve a plausible pathway to net zero, we focus on a 2035 electricity grid because of the vehicles that are going to be plugging into the grid, because of the homes that are going to be fueled by heat pumps. And so I think, in looking at what Canada's path is, we are, lucky in many provinces to benefit from a history of investment in hydroelectricity and other pieces that have provided, a leg up for certain jurisdictions. And certainly the resource profile is not going to be the same in every jurisdiction in the country.
Sorry to cut you off. We have limited time here, right? So
sorry,
no, that's okay. I'm trying to get a little bit more specific. Historically, yes, we have benefited from things like hydropower. We're seeing investments in wind and solar. In Saskatchewan, solar doesn't even register 1%. It's actually 0.002% of grid capacity. Wind consistently runs at about 7%. 191 megawatts is what we had of output on Monday, September 25th. Just today in Alberta, there's about 3.8 gigawatts of wind capacity, but yet only 512 megawatts was produced. And Alberta is the leader of wind in this country. They got the most capacity. They've been investing and building in it for years, to the point where they're already decommissioning farms that have been built. Same in Saskatchewan, and Suncor actually built the first wind farm in Saskatchewan in my riding. We still haven't heard what technology is going to be used to replace the coal that's being shuttered, the natural gas that the government wants to eliminate. No one's bothered to say how we're going to replace that, what technology we're going to use. And so I'm just curious if you could just break it down quickly. What technology is going to have to be used, how many of each units we're going to need to be able to meet the demand, which is going to be a doubling of the grid capacity.
So my very brief answer is start by maximizing renewables. Jurisdictions that have done that have seen, the cost benefit. We can currently produce wind in Alberta, for example, at a lower cost than natural gas power. Stability on the grid can be provided through a number of options, including increased investment in storage, interjurisdictional interties, so the batteries, with jurisdictional profiles being different. Your hydro in BC can be a battery for your wind in Alberta. Be creative about the distributed energy resources, i.e. all those electric vehicles that are going on the grid can be a battery in the future as we work through the details about relying on those at peak periods. What we have to do is build out for the moment that we need the most electricity on the grid, and through using some of these creative flexibilities, like household solar, like interties, we're going to be able to build a lot less to still have the same power available for Canadians.
Okay, so we're going to need still to double capacity, though. That doesn't tell us how we're going to double our capacity, right? For example, again, hydro has been a fantastic thing for this country, but how many more hydro dams is it going to take to double our grid? And can we do that in 12 years? How many wind turbines is it going to take to double our grid? I drive past all the new wind farms on my way to the airport every single week, and more times than not, there's not a single one of them producing power. It's minus 30, minus 35 in a couple of months, right? When people want to heat their homes, or during the summer when it's plus 30, 35, people want to cool their homes. So how are we going to be able to make sure that we have the actual baseload power we need? People don't want to rely on plugging their car into their house to heat their home when it's minus 35, right? We know of the issues that EVs have when it's extremely cold out, and we happen to live in a country where that is a regular occurrence. So how are we realistically going to do this?
Sorry, I understand our colleague would like to answer.
Yeah, so you posed the question in terms of how will we double the grid in 12 years. There's no need to double the grid in 12 years. It's going to take 35 years or more or 30 years to transfer all those end uses that are presently met by fossil fuels. Many of them, not all of them, some will be met by hydrogen and other clean fuels, but to transfer most of them onto the electricity grid. So you don't need to double the grid in 12 years. What you need is to decarbonize the grid over the next 12, 15, whatever it is, years, and incrementally add to it clean technologies. 20 years ago, the question you were posing would have been completely right on. Today, we know the technologies that can do, and there are other countries that have proven some of the ones that are not yet deployed in Canada. Storage, all the panoply of renewables. We know how to make electricity without fossil fuels, and firm electricity.
Mr. Meadowcroft, thank you for providing that in-depth answer. We'll have to move to the next round of questioning from Ms. Lapointe from the Liberal Party.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
As the MP for Sudbury, it will come as no surprise that I'll be asking questions about the role of critical minerals and the mining in the clean energy future. And we know energy technologies such as renewable energy generation require significant quantities of critical minerals. The Inflation Reduction Act contains several clean energy tax incentives and funding. There are many, and it would seem that critical minerals are key to at least two incentives in that act. One is the Advanced Manufacturing Production Tax Credit for equipment, including solar module, wind energy components, and battery cells. And the other one is the Clean Electricity Production Tax Credit, which pays producers for non-emitting electricity for each kilowatt hour they generate. So the U.S. will need Canada's critical minerals. We know that for programs like the two I just mentioned. However, if we send all our mined minerals to the U.S. for processing, we're going to miss out on a massive economic opportunity for Canada. And I believe you did mention that in your opening statements when you talked about focusing on the upstream. So how can we leverage our natural resources in supporting the IRA while creating, refining, and supply chain systems for the EV batteries right here at home?
Thank you so much for the question. One of the key findings that we've heard from experts along the supply chain is really the critical importance of industrial policy or strategy, and again, having Canada really lean in, figure out how to take best advantage in terms of the situation of its workforce, specific advantages and benefits to businesses seeking to work up the upstream. And that's not just the minerals themselves, it's the chemical processing of minerals and many other steps before you get to the actual building of a battery cell. So making sure that Canada is strategically focused on keeping some of that activity in Canada, so that we will no longer be the hewers of wood and drawers of water, the security of making sure that Canada is getting best possible return on its investments. So certainly looking at not only the tax credits that you've described, but also what other strategic supports. And I think Quebec has done a great job of providing some work at a provincial level to add a layer of strategy onto how will it secure investments, how will it position workers, and how will it make sure industrial lands are ready for this kind of investment.
Earlier this month, Joanna Kiriasis, your Director of Public Affairs at Clean Energy Canada, made the following statement, and that statement was in response to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report on production subsidies for Stellantis and Volkswagen. And she said, as the U.S. moves quickly to invest in and capture benefits from a booming North American battery industry, Canadian government support has been essential to keep pace with our most important trade partner. The clean energy transition is the economic opportunity of a generation, and as such is a deeply competitive one. Canada has many natural advantages, from abundant mineral resources to a highly skilled labor force, and yet success will only be rewarded to those countries that work for it. So my question to you is this: how will the IRA affect the competitiveness of Canada's mining industry, especially with the IRA's focus on Buy North American policies?
Well, there are some provisions in the IRA that are beneficial to Canadian minerals. It was clear that the U.S. was designing that policy to seek out friendly suppliers of critical minerals for their supply chains. There are some other components of the IRA that really do benefit a Buy American provision. So I think we've seen the Canadian government lean in with customized supports for strategic investments like gigafactories. I think continuing to think about how to, again, anchor some of that upstream investment potential where there may be less direct competition with the United States because we have our own minerals and we may have some both competitive advantage, proximity to resource extraction, and ensure that we're taking best advantage of those upstream opportunities. But absolutely echoing all the statements made by my colleague.
Do I still have time? Okay. You had mentioned 4 things that Canada should focus on. Of those 4 things, which one do you believe is the greatest threat to us? Either because we're behind on it, or it's we don't have enough of focus or resource on it. Which of those 4 would you consider?
Canada's in a tough position because you are so close to such a big economic player. So as a small open economy, thinking strategically and quickly are equally important. So making sure there's good policy and thoughtfulness around how do you secure the right investments to get the best advantage for Canada, but the kinds of permitting forms and the necessity to finalize the investment environment here in Canada as quickly as possible, I don't think should be underestimated either.
30 seconds.
Would another witness like to respond to that question as well? Huh? Okay.
I would just say, again, certainty, predictability, and transparency are key to investment decision. And there's lots of activity going on, and sometimes it's okay to be a first mover, and we should be thinking about that in that context.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lapointe. We'll now move to Monsieur Simard from the bloc for the next round of questions.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, and congratulations. I'm going to ask you to be indulgent with me because my questions might appear to be banal at the beginning, but given the report and given the study that's been done, I would ask you all to indicate, and this might help me save time, do you agree with my statement that it's essential to decarbonize the economy? You all agree? Mr. Moffat as well, you agree it's absolutely essential to have carbon-free economy?
An ambition within industry, for sure. Yeah. Yes.
C'est une ambition. Bon.
It's an ambition, all right. I will also ask you to specify if you agree that you have to have a price on carbon to affect this transition. Do you all agree to that?
Oui.
Yes?
Scientists have found that a carbon price is the most efficient way in a market economy to achieve emissions reductions in terms of price.
Merci, merci. Vous allez voir où
Thank you. Maybe you see where I'm going. I think it was Ms. Dugal earlier who said one of the major problems was the polarization and politicization. If I've understood correctly, we need, if we want to be competitive, we have to have a foreseeability, and we have to be consistent in our narrative. And it's very difficult to do that. We want to be able to attract investment, but to do so, we have to do what I just said. We have to recognize that it is extremely important to be able to do that, to attract money. You all agree? No? Perfect. So, a party that would defend the opposite to that, that would do something that would encourage polarization and politicization. Would you agree with this statement?
Peut-être. Oui.
With the translation, I missed the double negative there, but
Ouais.
just wanted to say to your point about carbon and carbon pricing. As my colleague said, it is an effective mechanism, and economists support it across the board. But the important thing is how we implement it and the competitiveness with which we do it. So if we use mechanisms like border carbon adjustments, we can
Tout à
ensure
fait.
that our path forward is a positive one. But it's not a matter of eliminating specific feedstocks, which I think needs to be remembered. It's the emissions that matter, and emissions
D'accord.
don't know borders. They don't know boundaries.
D'accord
We need
avec
to
vous.
work-
Le diable.
Yes, I certainly agree with you, Ms. Duval. The devil's in the details. But simply, if we want clarity and certainty, support from on the part of the federal government, we have to be consistent. So a party that doesn't recognize certain problems in a high-carbon economy would represent a brake on foreign investment. Am I right in saying this?
Problems here. We have to work to fight climate change. We also have an imperative to ensure that Canadians' quality of life is maintained, and there's no simple solution. So I think demonizing, someone who's not taking the perfect approach on one aspect of the problem is not the way we're going to get to solutions. So I think rather than saying that everyone has to be on the same page, the federal government and whichever parties in government has a responsibility to build that consensus by outlining a vision for the country and then working collaboratively towards it with everything clearly defined. Where do you see the role of resource industries within that equation? Where do you see the value of effective industrial and climate policy? But we need to be outcome-oriented rather than squabbling over the details first.
Vous êtes.
You are very diplomatic, Madame Dugal. You'd be a wonderful politician. What I want to point out to you is this. If our concern is to attract foreign investment in clean energy, we have to send a clear message that we believe in clean energy. That's what I'm trying to get at and trying to make you all say. We all believe in clean energy. Ms. Doran?
Give the example of the United Kingdom that has recently had some changes in climate policy, and I think the business community in the United Kingdom was one of the first to say, as I think we've heard from business colleagues at the table here, one of the key pieces is just creating a certainty in the investment climate, and that's not policy dependent. It's really just ensuring that there is a predictability in the energy transition and the investment climate.
Voilà. Mais je pense qu'on dit grosso.
Yes, I think we're saying the same thing, more or less, because what creates uncertainty for me in the investment climate is to know that eventually a party might come to power and might take an axe to all of the financial supports that are there for this sector. That creates uncertainty. Would you not agree? There would not be continuity.
Continuity is important, and it's a challenge of democratically elected governments to respond to the needs of the electorate, and affordability pressures are hitting really hard. So you're right that is a risk, and I think that's why any government advancing energy transition, advancing climate action needs to do so in a way that cannot be easily reversed because it gains the ill will of the populace. If that's prioritized, then policies will be resilient and they will last for a long time and create that investment certainty that we need.
Merci, je vous remercie beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monsieur Simard. We'll now move to Mr. Angus with the NDP for 6 minutes.
Thank you, and congratulations, Chair, on your appointment. I sometimes have to put my foot in and say that Ms. Lapointe is not the only person representing Base Metal Canada. Her neighboring riding has got many, many mines in operation. And I just want to say we'll take any of your workers to get our new projects off the ground. I hear this line that it takes 10 years to to get a mine off the ground because of regulatory. I've never met anybody in mining who put a mine in, spent billions in less than 10 years because it is an enormous investment. So, Mr. Moffat, I want to ask you, Volkswagen has put $7 billion into the battery plant at St. Thomas to build batteries for a market that hasn't been established fully yet. It's not up and running in a way that I'd like to see. They have to have the supply chain, which is an issue as well. We know that we have an advantage in Canada over Europe, which would love to have these battery plants, but they don't have the supply chain. So is the Chemical Association ready? Are they in discussion with the battery plant manufacturers? Are we set to be able to supply, to give the supply chain necessary to get these battery plants into operation and make this market happen? Because $7 billion gamble is a huge undertaking.
Thanks very much for the question. I always like to say critical minerals are just rocks without chemistry to actually refine those rocks and not trying to create controversy. But I guess what I would say is, from an association perspective, are we involved? No. Are our members active? Absolutely. Some great initiative taking place in the Bécancour region. There are a number of battery-related chemical projects that are being proposed there, and again, I think that speaks to the programs and policies that are in place in Quebec to attract those investments. And again, this is about the value chain, and this is about providing the critical minerals, and there will be chemistry facilities involved as the supply chain for those projects.
Thank you. Ms. Doran, I want to ask you in terms of, it's hard to keep up. My numbers get going out of date very quickly on how fast this transition has happened since the IRA. And we certainly see Mr. Meadowcraft mentioned the International Energy Agency, which seems to be just gaga about how fast this is happening. I want to ask you, what does that mean for the consumer? Because what we hear from the Conservatives all the time is the carbon tax. People can't heat their homes. People can't drive. In this transition, what offer is on the table for affordability?
Thank you so much for the question. We actually released a report today looking at household affordability and energy transition. And we looked to really crunch the numbers on what are the impacts at the household level about adopting EVs, about making the switch to heat pumps. And we looked at average households in the Greater Toronto, Hamilton area who made the switch to a heat pump, to an electric vehicle at the condo level, who may have adopted a transit pass, folks who switched their cooktops for electric. And we found the further you went along that spectrum, away from kind of how we have traditionally heated and powered our homes and vehicles with fossil fuels, the more money you'd save. And it really added up over time. We found a household homeowner in the GTHA could save $800 a month or $10,000 a year, a condo owner $5,500. And colleagues at the Climate Institute, as well as the IEA, have also found that over time, through the energy transition, energy prices for individual consumers and households will actually go down. So right now, where your consumers are really feeling the pinch at the gas pump, electric vehicles can be powered by electricity that will still cost less over time, and electric vehicles being more efficient, even if rates were to raise slightly, they would still cost less than what households are currently paying for their overall energy bills.
Thank you. Well, I certainly talk with envy with my colleagues in northern British Columbia who can drive all over the north on $5, and in my region it kills us because we don't have any of the infrastructure in place. But I want to ask about heat pumps because, again, in my region, it's very rural. People are on rural farms and they heat with oil because they have no other alternatives. It's getting more and more difficult not only to pay for oil, but to get them serviced and insurance. And I know a lot of seniors who simply aren't going to get through the winter. We have a program for heat pumps. God help us if we could actually make it work. What do we actually have to do to be able to say to people, yeah, you can transition and this is how we're going to help you? Is our present offer, because I've not seen a single person get a heat pump in my region. What do we need to do? What is practical so that we can say to people, yeah, here's your transition, here's how you save money?
So I think ensuring affordability, accessibility, and simplicity in the energy transition will be key. And I think we've suggested that the program you're describing with $10,000 going to transitions from oil to heat pumps could even be increased by the federal government to be able to make it accessible for low-income households across the country to have a free heat pump, which is what happens in provinces in the Atlantic region. I believe Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia currently have those programs in place. So there's more that can be done to make that accessible, and really looking at how the programs are, if it's easy to find out about them, to access them. Do you need someone to come into your home and do an audit? Is it possible for the government to cover that cost up front, the way that electric vehicles happen directly at the auto dealership?
Thank you.
Mr. Angus, time's up. Oh, thank you. Right on time.
I've got your back, Chair. I got your back.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We'll now move over to the next round of 5-minute round of questions. Start off with Ms. Stubbs from the CPC.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Congratulations on your new role as of today. Mr. Meadowcroft, it might surprise you to hear that Conservatives agree wholeheartedly with you about the realism around the timeline in which such a transformation should occur. And that's why it's our position that governments shouldn't be setting targets, in some cases complete with criminal charges, and others that are unrealistic on the timelines that they've set, and that they owe these answers to Canadians about exactly how these goals are going to be achieved. Rachel, you're very, Ms. Doran, you are so articulate, and you're very powerful, and so I just want to recognize that and just acknowledge your capacity here, of course, to help the coalition partners get their messages out on the policy agenda that you helped deliver and develop for the government when you were the senior advisor to Minister Wilkinson. So given that much of the airtime has been given to you today, I'm just going to maybe ask the other witnesses to make some comments on the following questions. So, of course, Conservatives agree wholeheartedly that Canada must be competitive, that we must secure our supply chains, our value chains. We must put the cart before the horse. So we must be developing our resources for the rare earth metals and the critical minerals that then can feed into the value and supply chains to develop EVs. We agree the interties need to be done. There has to be end user distribution networks. All of those are undone. And of course, the governments and politicians who wax eloquent in this regard have not, to this date, answered Canadians a single actual concrete, tangible question about how all of that is actually going to unfold in 11 years. So given that all of you, though, have recognized the issue of competitiveness and different policies, of course, economists who propose carbon taxes for the purposes of emissions reduction do so in the context of saying that it must be implemented with an equivalent reduction of red tape and all other kinds of taxes, as well as protections for, in Canada's case, very critical emissions-intensive trade-exposed industry. And that model, of course, is not on the table for debate in Canada. It's not the one being implemented by this government. I would note some of the competitiveness issues, and I hope that the representatives from the Chemistry Industry Association, also from Resource Works, might want to get into this. You know, what would strike me is that the U.S. has no national carbon tax, and Canada does, that the U.S. has not nearly as aggressive as fuel regs that have caused all kinds of uncertainty and are about to come in. That the U.S. has production incentives, not just investment incentives, that Canada has investment tax credits that aren't ready, no production incentives, and is, as we've all discussed, not yet complete. The U.S. has increased foreign private sector investment. Canada's is dropping like a lead weight because of the policies that hold ourselves back. And, of course, in Alberta's case, it is the private sector that has led those investments in clean energy and renewables. And, in fact, the oil and gas sector that accounts for 75% of private sector clean tech investment. And it's the province of Alberta and oil and gas and pipeline companies who have long led this country in the development of renewables and alternative energies and the technology of the future, and we'll do it again if we could just be allowed. So I also partly represent the industrial heartland, and I thought you may want to comment about policy cues like declaring plastics as as toxins, or some of these other policies that do the exact opposite of what people who say they want to incent investment and develop all of these technologies and products of the future. I just open it up and let you take the remainder of the time if you want to comment on any of those contradictions.
Thank you for the question. What I would say is, it's about regional opportunities and constraints when you think about where Canada is relative to the U.S. They're completely different systems. They're completely different approaches. And why is it that Canada has a large industrial cluster in Southern Ontario? Why chemical cluster? Why does Canada have chemical manufacturing cluster in the industrial heartland and growing in other jurisdictions in the province? And why do we have a cluster in Quebec? And again, it's regional opportunities. And again, industry has to deal with governments of the day. Decisions are made based on the availability of inputs, well-priced, reliable power, well-priced, abundant, low-carbon feedstock in Western Canada. And so these all factor in. There's some element to your question that is overly political for an association to get into. But it's about opportunities and constraints and leveraging off of those opportunities to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you. We'll now move to Mr. Sorbara for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations on your new role. First, I'll go to Rachel over at Clean Energy Canada, Ms. Turan, for a couple of reasons. First off, it is my alma mater that Clean Energy Canada is situated at Simon Fraser University. About 25 or 26 years ago, but not to date myself, but it is a place where I grew as an individual and completed my first degree. I do want to just put on the record, it's not a question, I do want to put on the record that I agree with the report that was issued, or the commentary that was issued. When building Canada's EV battery supply chain, the sum is greater than the parts. Landing the two EV plants, battery plants, the Stellantis and the Volkswagen, are strategic investments for Ontario, for Canada, and more so are part of a larger picture where you have to measure both the direct impact of those plants, but also the indirect impact of then setting up and putting into place an actual supply chain. Canada was recognized for that when we looked at the BNEF, the Bloomberg New Index, where we moved up to second place globally on the electric vehicle supply chain. I always look at things as a continuum, whether it's the housing market, whether it's the industrial sector, and this place being the automotive sector. And the electric vehicle sector is a continuum. And this is what we're doing in Canada very strategically, where we are putting in place the pieces for a supply chain through a continuum, which will benefit Canadians, not just today, but for generations to come. So I thank Clean Energy Canada for that. My question, however, is going to go to the folks at Chemistry Canada. I've worked with you folks for a long time. I was, many years pre-COVID, I went out to the Alberta Industrial Heartland, visited the facilities that some of them are being constructed, multi-billion-dollar investments. I do believe in global competition, and we need to always measure that in place. But if you can just reference it in the global marketplace, because there is leakage. We do know that. Our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions here in Canada, but globally. If you can talk about the global competition for these type of facilities and the opportunities that, for example, Alberta as a province has within our beautiful country, I would be really happy to hear that.
What I'd like to say in that regard is, again, chemistry is probably one of the largest globally traded commodities, trillion-dollar industry. And the reality is the pathway to manufacture these chemistries in Canada is a little bit different than in China or in Asia or in the Middle East. And so in Canada, we use low-carbon natural gas. It is the most emission intensive, most emission efficient pathway to manufacture these chemicals compared to coal to olefins, which you would see in China, or crude oil naphtha to chemicals that you would see in Europe and in some parts of Asia. So we're competing against higher carbon intensity products. The reality is that those commodities are not traded globally based on their carbon intensity. And so if it comes to a time where there actually is a premium placed on commodities that have a lower carbon intensity, then there will be some value and benefit to chemistry produced in Canada. I always kind of, comment a little bit. There's this notion that Canada moving natural gas via LNG to Asia will generate some benefit through Article 6 in terms of avoided emissions in other jurisdictions. The reality is chemistry is a proxy for energy, and the lowest carbon pathway to manufacture these chemistries is here in Canada. And we should be exporting these products globally and securing emission benefits through that. So, I mean, that was a roundabout way of answering your question. The reality is that there is no premium for what we do here in Canada, and carbon pricing and regulations around reducing the carbon intensity. When you're exporting 80% of what you produce, there's no way to get a return on those costs, right?
On the sector's path to net zero by 2050, I've read, you can go to an AIF or 10K and read whichever one of your members, I don't want to single out one or two, and they've all committed to that path to getting to net zero. Is that not correct?
I would say that for the most part, most companies have in place aspirational goals for Scope 1, Scope 2, and or Scope 3 emissions by a point in time, 2050 for sure, yes.
We are done for time. Thank you,
Thank you,
Mr. Cerbero, and thank you for your answers, Mr. Moffat. We'll now move for a 2.5-minute round to Monsieur Simard.
I think that it was in Ms. Doran's presentation that you said, according to the models, there would be 5 times more jobs created in clean energy by 2030. And if I refer to Mr. Midcroft's presentation, specifically looking at industrial growth, we have to turn the corner in terms of using fossil fuels. But is there an economy that would remain based on fossil fuels? Would that remain a permanent factor over the next decades, in your opinion? Well, the question as to the speed at which the transfer will occur is something that we just don't know exactly. We know that there is a majority of countries in the world want to get to net zero by the middle of the century. But one thing is sure, there'll be a decline. There'll be a drop in the usage, therefore, of oil and gas. However, it would be very difficult, to my mind, to stay just with that type of product.
Is still somewhat up in the air. It depends on technological developments. It depends on political decisions by many countries. Most of the models for decarbonization show that there will still be a viable oil industry in Canada in 2050. There are other uses for fossil fuels other than burning them to heat houses or using them to power cars. What we would need to do in a decarbonized world is make sure those fossil resources are produced without emissions, so using CCS or other techniques. Yeah. I see the yellow card.
Je comprends tout à fait ce.
Yes, I certainly understand what you're saying. But what I'd like to hear you on is this. We won't be using more oil. These new gas and oil development projects would not be occurring.
In Canada has probably passed. So, yes, I wouldn't hitch my my wagon to that horse. Doesn't mean the industry will disappear, but the growth is going to be
Thank you,
in clean
Mr.
energy.
Meadowcroft.
Merci.
Time's up. Thank you, Mr. Smart. We'll move over to Mr. Angus for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. Again, you mentioned the International Energy Agency latest report, Mr. Meadowcroft, and it's I read them. They're usually pretty boring. They're almost beside themselves right now. They can't keep up with they said staggering level of growth in clean energy. For the first time, I think it's almost double clean energy to fossil fuel. But what they said, though, also was that, again, the big oil companies are not doing their part, and that's the threat. I don't know if you've had a chance to read the people of the state of California versus ExxonMobil, Shell, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, British Petroleum. It's a fascinating read. And I mention it because they actually identify all the main companies for their claim that they are working towards net zero, that they are presenting themselves as climate leaders when they're doubling down on fossil fuels at a staggering rate. And this is part of the indictment against these companies. And I noticed Suncor has done the same thing. It's walked away on sustainability. I wanted to get your perspective on where we're at. On the one hand, we could actually save ourselves at 1.5, and on the other, we see the oil companies, the big tobacco indictment, that their strategy is to say they're on clean energy when they're actually heavily doubling down on fossil fuels. For you.
So, yeah. So if my academic research studies transitions in big, what we call socio-technical systems. And this is everything to developing piped water and sewage and transformation of farming to rely on chemical fertilizers, many different changes. And the typical pattern is that most of the incumbent industry kind of sticks with the old technology because they're doing so well selling it and they have many sunk costs in investment. And very often, not always, but very often the pressure comes to change from outside. So I gave the Kodak example. It wasn't the film companies that made the transformation. It came completely from outside with the digital technologies. Sometimes what I'm calling incumbents, the established firms, can adapt. And that's what I would hope for Canadian industry, that some of our big energy companies could adapt and start investing in some of the technologies of the future as well as the technologies that they master already. But we'll see.
Thank you. Time's up. Thank you for your answer. We'll now move to Mr. Falk for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your new role. I'm sure you'll do well. Thank you to all our witnesses. And I know the time will evaporate quickly, and so I'll start off right away with Margarita. You've had lots of international experience in the UAE and Taiwan, helping consult on different energy projects and resource development. You talked a little bit about LNG here in your initial opening comments, and I am just wondering, when you look at Canada's resources, what do you see right now as most in demand?
I think Canadian ingenuity and our ability to tap into the raw materials that we have at our disposal is the thing that we have the greatest value in offering to the world. I see a huge amount of traction in British Columbia right now on LNG, as you mentioned. Highly promising, and we've been hearing a lot of conversation here about the different drivers of energy systems transformation. So policy, of course, when societies collectively decide we need to go in one direction, can provide that push. We see a positive effect from clustering when an industry has developed a base of people and skills and institutions and organizations and companies working together with a rich, diverse supply chain. You do get some positive effects from that as a driver of innovation and transformation. But I think ultimately markets and consumer demand is what's going to determine the direction of the transition transition. And when we're talking about these highly promising opportunities for Canada, we need to remember that we're a small open economy. We're a trading nation. And as a trading nation, we can't just be looking to our domestic consumption and the changes we can make in how we produce and use things like energy within Canada. It's about what we offer to the world. So technology transfer from clean technologies is a very valuable thing that we can provide. But I think those raw commodities produced in an environment that leads the world on many dimensions is where that value is. And while the demand is there for industries like LNG, I think we should enable those industries to survive. Capital risk is a good filter for that. So if private industry is willing to take the risk, they believe the conditions in the world at large would enable them to go out there and sell those products, policymakers should be responsive to that, rather than saying, let's arbitrarily kneecap industries that we don't think meet our ideal future scenario for what Canada's economy should look like. And that's not to say there shouldn't be a nudge from policymakers. I strongly support the work that colleagues here are doing to advance that push within government and from outside of government, but we need to, in a sense, take stock of our fundamentals. And if as a country we are blind to what has been our economic strength and where we can derive the greatest security and well-being for Canadians in increasingly uncertain times, we're going to be at a serious disadvantage. And I'm worried that we're not just going to be outcompeted by the U.S., but we're actually going to be experiencing a substantially deprived quality of life for all Canadians.
Okay. Some of your work has been in the field of energy security and grid capacities and all that. Where do you see the biggest risk for Canada going forward?
I think it's, as I sort of alluded to, this distinction between domestic energy policy and international export. It's been a problem long recognized by many analysts, and I'm a generalist, so to take what I say with that in mind, that we just don't have enough interties between provinces. There's work being done to remedy this, but we have serious deficiencies in how we use the resources that we currently have in the country to get energy where it's needed. I come from BC, like Manitoba, which is a major producer of hydroelectric power. It's a mystery for me that we don't get to sell enough of it to the rest of Canada, but instead we sell to the United States. I see small modular reactors as a promising opportunity, but ultimately the security and the stability of that supply for Canadians is important for things like affordability. But when it comes to exports,
And then I'm running quickly out of time here. So when it comes to developing some of these resources that you say Canada is rich in, what are the impediments to doing that? Do we have a regulatory environment that is not friendly?
Regulatory capacity, yes. Certainty, as I mentioned, the politicization of the process sometimes makes the outcomes from the regulatory process uncertain. That impedes capital flow. We're losing a lot of investment dollars. I'd say capacity, even within Indigenous communities, is another one. Mining is one where increasingly, and this is positive, we see the involvement of Indigenous communities. But if that capacity is not there to support their participation in the decision-making process, we actually see material delays in permitting and approvals and ability for joint ventures and things like that to be worked out. So I think devoting more energy to being outcome oriented and saying these are the things we want and then working backwards from that will get us where we need to be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Falk. We will now move to Mr. Aldag for our final 5 minutes for today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations. Yeah, that's right. Congratulations on your election. I'd like to point out that yesterday I was elected as the chair of the INAN Committee, Indigenous and Northern Affairs. Today we tabled our first report, and so I'm hoping that this committee will be able to, under your leadership, take up that same pace of work and have lots of things come forward. So look forward to working with you in your new capacity. That's right. And I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here for the excellent conversation that you've had today, that we've had so far. In the opening statements, it was mentioned that Canada can't compete dollar for dollar with what the Americans are doing under their IRA. And so in the fall economic statement last year with the spring budget, we saw some very targeted measures that were put in place. Things like, I think we all know this, but we had, of course, I've lost my place now. A bunch of stuff. The Canada Growth Fund, the investment tax credit for clean technologies, hydrogen as a pursuit, and then in the budget, continuing to grow things with the pursuit of this transition through other tax credit measures and on and on. What I'm curious on is your thoughts. We've seen the federal government, I think, really step up and try to move our economy to the decarbonizing, moving to a green, and competing with to make sure that there's investment dollars staying in Canada. And yet we have provinces like Alberta that we've seen introduce the moratorium on clean energy projects. There's an article from the Calgary Herald that indicates that they anticipate 118 projects have been affected, representing $33 billion in investment and enough work to give 24,000 people a job for a year. To me, that should be really concerning to Canadians and particularly to Albertans. And so the thoughts I'd like you to get from you are, when we have the federal government providing such leadership, what are the opportunities that we're losing when the provinces fight tooth and nail along the way to retain old ways, and we're seeing loss of investment that should be coming to Canada despite the RA, and yet we're creating this situation. Does it mean that all of the investment's going to go to BC? Or, what measures does the federal government need to put in play, or is there anything beyond what we've already done to try to make sure that we do retain investments, that Canada does continue on this transition, that we don't bury our heads in the soil and lose out on the great opportunities to do the right thing at this point in time? So, any thoughts on the responses of the IRA, Canada's response to the IRA, and how we compete with this sort of tension that we're seeing right now in Canada?
Well, one very quick thing that I would like to note is that the IRA has been the law of the United States since August of 2022, and there is not a single tax credit that has been proposed that is currently a law in Canada. That's part of our problem right now, particularly around things like carbon capture and storage, where we've been talking really since 2020, 2019. This is the fourth year, the most recently completed consultation, where we've been discussing this tax credit. And there's excellent parts of it. There's other parts that we'd like to have a chat about, but there's excellent attributes to that tax credit, but nobody can take advantage of it. It's not the law of the land. That is what I think if there's one message you could take away from the chemistry sector today, is we have to get these past the House of Commons. This has to be a statute in Canada, and then it's unlocking private sector capital. It's up to our companies to deliver, but we need that as law first. You cannot take a promise to your board to approve a final investment decision. You need something a bit more concrete.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is all party support to move things forward as soon as we can get the legislation tabled and make this happen. Any other thoughts from any of you?
Yeah, you raise the question about the relationship ultimately between the federal government and the provinces. And of course, Canada has a complicated political system with jurisdictional divisions and elections from time to time that will turn over governments in a province or federally or things like that. From the point of view of the energy transition, some sort of policy stability, maybe not the details of this policy and that policy, but at the least that they tend in the same direction, the directionality of policy is really very desirable. And I just want to say one thing. There's no way the federal government can decarbonize Canada on its own. It depends in cooperation with the provinces. The political economies of energy are different from one side of the country to the other. Where people get their energy, how the economy has been built is different in Quebec and Alberta. Yet, over the long term, we want each to develop their own pathways towards a net zero world. So one of the things my organization does is we really believe in sector and regional pathways because of the nature of Canada and the nature of the problem. And every sector won't decarbonize at the same rate. So vehicles, light-duty vehicles are happening rapidly now. Heavy trucks are a big problem, and we'll wait for a decade or whatever. And it's the same provincially. What will happen in BC is just going to be different than will happen in Ontario. Different sources of energy. And that's important that we choose a way that's flexible, that has federal leadership, but also substantial autonomy for the provinces to make their own way.
Thank you, Mr. Meadowcroft, and that's it for time. I want to thank the witnesses for your testimony today and great insights. Thank you all very so much. If you did miss something and would like to provide a written submission to the clerk, please do so. and we look forward to seeing you again sometime, possibly in a future study. Colleagues, like the electricity study that's coming up next. Colleagues, we will now suspend for a few minutes so we can go into in-camera business, and we will rejoin in a few minutes once we're set up to do that. Thank you.
Thank you.